Joe Griffin, thank you so much for joining me today on the Professional Hypnotherapists Podcast.
Delighted to be here, Aidan.
And today we're going to talk about your co-authored book with Ivan Tyrrell, which is this one, a very well-known book, a book that every therapist and indeed non-therapist should have in their library. What was your inspiration, Joe, for writing this book?
Well, my inspiration was that the whole atmosphere and the whole theoretical world of addiction 25 years ago was very depressing, very full of foreboding. Addiction was a biological illness. You had it for life. You
Yeah.
were somehow born to be a damaged human being. I
Mhm.
just found that very depressing. and
Yes.
there wasn't any real basis for it. Because
Yeah.
if one looked at the full field of data, people were recovering from addictions all the time. There was mass in
Mhm.
there hundreds of thousands that were recovering from them. The
Yeah.
ones who were slow to recover were the ones who were going into full-time therapy and going into residential treatment centers at that time. They were recovering at a much slower rate than people who never went into therapy, but who somehow found the resources within their relationships and their community to get on top of addiction.
Mhm.
So the field of therapy was hopelessly deterministic and depressed and really didn't reflect reality.
Mhm, mhm. It was almost, Joe, almost as though that, if you had this addiction, as you say, you had it for life,
Yes.
you know.
And the truth was people have always been and continue to
Mm,
recover from addiction.
yeah, yeah. So, can you explain your central approach to overcoming addiction and how it differs from what we heretofore were used to?
Yes. Rather than seeing addiction as something that you're genetically predisposed to get it, it was almost a certainty. It was a disease that was programmed into your genetic inheritance. Rather than seeing it that way, we know, for example, the way our genetic inheritance works, Aidan, is that virtually all human behavior is about 50% genetically influenced and 50% learned. So, yes, of
Mhm.
course, there is a genetic contribution to addiction, but it doesn't mean that nature wants us to get addiction. So, for example, some people may be genetically more predisposed to risk taking than others, but they
Yeah.
turn that predisposition into successful entrepreneurship and become
Uh-huh.
successful business people. Whereas some other people will turn it into a gambling addiction and destroy their lives with it. But it's the same
Yes.
genetic inheritance. So the genetic inheritance is not destiny, it's how we utilize it. And the key central idea here, Aidan, is that the reason people become addicts is the same reason people develop mental illness. And the reason is quite simply they cannot put together a life that works. They cannot get essential emotional needs met. So they are suffering psychologically and emotionally. And they turn to addiction as a form of medication to get away from the terrible feelings that they're having of being useless and not being of loneliness and isolation and having no control and things on top of them. And addiction is an attempt at self-medication.
Yeah. And you touched on it there, Joe, the whole area of human needs. And
Yeah.
you yourself with Ivan Tyrrell formed the Human Giv Institute. And tell us about that.
Well, we formed the Human Giv Institute about 20 years ago, and we really felt that the whole field of psychotherapy at the time really was stuck in the past in theories that were no longer scientifically validated. And tools, for example, like hypnosis, which are perhaps the single most powerful psychotherapeutic tool in existence, was not a part
Yes.
of most treatments. And that appalled us. And so we felt, in fact, to be absolutely honest with you, my motivation was to get hypnotherapy into the treatment of mental illness in the NHS in Britain. And I knew no way we could go in the front door and say, we want to teach you how to use hypnosis. So they were terrified of it because they didn't understand it. So we had
Yeah.
to rename it guided imagery, and we had to build a therapeutic model around it. And the therapeutic model was Human Givens, that illnesses and mental disorders arise because people are not getting their needs met. Now that's just logical. That's just logical. If you take any organism, like say a sunflower, and you plant it in the right area where it can draw the right nourishment from the soil, where it can get the right amount of sunlight, etc., it'll thrive. You put it into an environment where it can't get its needs met, it won't thrive.
Yeah.
And just as that's true with sunflower, it's true of a human being.
So
fact,
the environment is important.
Well, the environment is all important. In fact, there was a tremendous naturalistic experiment that occurred in 1975, way back as far as that. And that was the end of the Vietnam War. I'm sure you're familiar with this.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there are tens of thousands heavily addicted to heroin. The American government paralyzed with fear. Oh my God, we're bringing these terrible people home. They will take over the mafia. They will destroy our society. They were terrified. So they monitored them for the next couple of years. And as you know, 80% of them give up heroin.
Yeah.
All theory books said it's not possible. You cannot give up heroin. You're a heroin addict for life. But they just give it up. And why did they give it up? They gave it up because they had an environment wherein their needs could be met. Loving families, supportive relationships, jobs they could go into, special programs for the GIs to go to university, special rates, etc. And the ones who didn't give it up were the ones who couldn't get their needs met. They had PTSD, they came from broken families, they had other psychological problems. So it's just obviously true and borne out by the evidence that it's the environment holds the key to mental illness, holds the key to addiction. Now, the environment is one of three factors, Aidan. An environment wherein you can't get your needs met will trigger off addiction or depression or anxiety disorders. But the second factor is that a person may be suffering from some form of damage that's preventing them from getting their needs met. Now, this could be a damage to their brain, a car accident, it could be dementia. But when I worked in rehab, supervising the training of addiction counselors, I often found that the damage was most often psychological. They were suffering either from undiagnosed bipolar disorder, which is surprisingly common, and the people were drinking to try and regulate their moods. They were suffering from untreated post-traumatic stress disorder. This could be from the results of car accidents. It could be from the results of being bullied at work. It could be the result of being in an abusive relationship or sexually attacked or whatever. But they had a major trauma, and the addiction was an attempt to cope with that. So, and in some cases, people were missing key life skills that prevented them getting on with their life. Now, these people, for example, might be, say, have a as we now call it, a neurodivergent personality, but our brain organization. But very often that can be accompanied with certain deficits, say in social skills and being able to read people and being able to have the skills to form relationships. And that was their vulnerability to addiction. So we have to look at what is preventing these people from getting their needs met and remove those barriers with the right form of therapy. Now, when we get into specifically what's required for addiction, there's an additional component that's required, which hypnotherapists will be brilliant at. Get to that when you're ready.
Right. Well, no, let's go there, Joe, because in terms of hypnotherapy, and indeed, you mentioned that it was precisely because you knew the benefits of hypnotherapy that you wanted to get it into the NHS in the UK. So maybe you continue with that train, please.
Right. To be able to help a person recover from addiction, we need a plan, and there's three elements to the plan for it to work. One of those elements is that we have to be able to help them remove the barriers to them getting their needs met, whether that is a lack of certain form of social skills, whether that is a form of trauma that needs treatment, whatever it might be. We have to help them get treatment for bipolar disorder, but we have to remove the barrier. The second thing we have to do is we have to help them to identify high-risk situations, because the desire for a cigarette can be triggered, or a drink, or whatever it might be, cocaine, can be triggered off so fast in the brain that you are overwhelmed by it. So we have to be able to anticipate these high-risk situations and go into them with raised consciousness and having a plan to deal with it. What happens if I go into the pub and I'm offered a drink? What am I going to do? And they try to persuade me to have a drink. What's my plan? So we need a plan for high-risk situations. But the third element is where hypnotherapy comes in. The third element is this. A person who has an addictive habit has programmed a set of expectations into their brain about the joy and the good feelings and the euphoria that the addictive habit is going to give them, whether it is buying out, purchasing out of control, whether it is drinking, whether it is cocaine, whether it's cigarettes, doesn't matter, gambling, whatever it might be. But they have a set of expectations that this is going to give them great feelings. And these set of expectations are completely unrealistic because they are the result of what's called euphoric recall. That is, the addiction circuit in the brain edits our experiences and it cuts out all the bad side of the addictive habit. If we want to remember, all the times when we went out and got drunk, and we think about it and we talk about it with our friends, we only remember the laughter and the crack we had and all the rest of it. We forget about the fact that we fell down into a bush on the way home and tore our best suit. We forget about the fact that we went to kiss our child goodnight and vomited all over them. We forget about the fact of waking up in the morning, trembling and shaking, can't remember what we did, praying to God that we haven't done something terrible or said something terrible that's going to ruin the rest of our lives. All that shame and bad stuff is cut out. We just get the euphoric recall when we're thinking of it. And what hypnotherapy can do is we have to reverse those expectations. We have to program in pain expectations if we indulge in the addiction.
Right.
And joy and great positive expectations if we stop doing it. We have to reverse the expectations.
Yes.
And it's okay doing cognitive therapy, talking about it, but it doesn't get anywhere near the effectiveness of going into the imagination, going into the REM state, the brain's natural programming state, and programming in real powerful negative expectations. So can I give you an example of what I mean by that?
Absolutely, yeah, please. Yeah.
Let's say somebody wants to give up smoking. Now, smoking is an incredibly powerful addiction, and it really can destroy someone's life. I mean, it does it all the time. Tens of thousands of people die from it. Now, people have positive expectations associated with smoking, but in the hypnotic state, we can start to reprogram that. We could say, and language is going to be very important here because we don't want to say that somebody's going to get cancer because that would be anti-therapeutic, it would be wrong. But what we can say is, a lot of people who smoke continually get cancer as a result of it. Now, I'd like you to imagine what could, not what will happen, what could have happened to you had you continued to smoke. Had you continued to smoke, you could have found yourself in the future in a hospital bed, seriously ill from the effects of smoking. Your life is in danger. You may have a terminal illness, maybe lung cancer, it could be heart disease. And your children, the people you love, are gathered around your bed. And they're there to say goodbye to you. And your children will come over and they're hugging you and they're saying, please don't die, Dad. Please don't die. We don't want you to die, Dad. And you know there's nothing you can do about it. The cigarettes have packed you in. It's over. You love, as far as children are concerned, you love the fags more than you love them. And you're never going to see them go through school. You're never going to see them get their first jobs. You're never going to be there to see them get married. And all those wonderful experiences that they wanted to share with you have been stolen off you by these cigarettes. So I want you to say no to smoking because that doesn't have to happen. It does not have to be that way. You can live for years, if not decades longer once you quit smoking. And all these wonderful experiences can be yours. Waking up in the morning, taking a deep breath and feeling more alive because you're a non-smoker. Being able to think more clearly without your brain polluted. Having more energy and fitness. More self-esteem because most intelligent people like that, most intelligent people don't smoke anymore. Of course, you're an intelligent person. You wouldn't be here otherwise. And all that guilt about smoking. Yeah. Not to start counting the tens of thousands of pounds you're going to save over the next number of years by being a non-smoker. So we reverse that conditioning. We say, if even the thought of a fag comes into your mind, I want you to immediately see yourself coughing and wheezing and mouthfuls of snot coming up and see yourself in that hospital bed dying and your children begging you to come home. And say no to smoking. And if you do that in hypnosis, Aidan, that's 10 times more powerful.
Yes. There's an acceleration there.
Oh, yes. And it just becomes more emotionally real to them. You'll often even see, and I don't mind if I see tears coming down their eyes because I'm trying to save this person's life.
Yes, of course. And just on that, Joe, with regard to, the importance of beliefs. And what we believe is almost like a wish fulfillment. And, I come back to, I come back to that. What we actually believe actually happens. So, what do you say to someone who there's a train of a school of thought out there, I want to call it that. They say that, well, smoking isn't an addiction.
Well, of course, the word addiction is an abstraction, and then we'll have to
Yes.
unpack what we actually mean by it. And I never get into arguments about whether something is an addiction or not. You have, at the moment, self-admittedly got a compulsive behavior that is interfering with the quality of your life and likely to do you immense damage in the future. Whether you
Yeah.
want to call it a habit or an addiction is neither here nor there. I want to help you
Yeah.
to get that control.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah, that I like that, because when you talk about compulsive behavior, it gives it a different slant.
yeah.
Again, and thank you for that. Now, on page 82, you mentioned that logic never cured addiction, but your emotions can.
Yes, exactly that. Exactly that. Every person who's smoking a packet of fags a day knows they shouldn't smoke. They know all the reasons why they shouldn't smoke. Logically, they want to stop because the surveys show that most of them want to stop, but they can't. So
Mhm.
just piling logic on won't do it. And the main reason it won't do it is we have to understand how cravings are set off. That's one of the things we have to understand.
Yeah.
There's a really powerful piece of knowledge around cravings, because a lot of people are terrified to give up their drink or their excessive drinking or their cocaine or their cigarettes, whatever it might be, because they think they're going to suffer terrible withdrawal symptoms. And the really important piece of knowledge is you do not have to have severe withdrawal symptoms. They're completely controllable. All you have to do is have a mild piece of discomfort, because withdrawal symptoms come in two stages. The first stage is a physiological piece of discomfort. Now, this is mild. The strongest piece of physiological discomfort you can have as a withdrawal symptom is a hunger pang, because without food, we die. And yet,
Mm.
nature does not allow you to get a lot of pain with a hunger pang, because if food is not available to you, you have to have a clear head to go out and hunt for it and find it. You can't do that if you're consumed with emotional
Yeah.
pain. So we're
Yeah.
not designed, we shouldn't be getting strong withdrawal symptoms, but we can get them. And it's because of this two-stage process. The first stage is just a feeling of discomfort, like you get, oh yeah, maybe I'd like a cup of tea or something. That's mild. But the next stage is if you now indulge a fantasy about, oh, how I'd love to have a cigarette now. God, I'm really going to have a cigarette. That triggers off a massive dopamine release, which creates a really powerful craving, which is almost impossible to suppress. And even if you do suppress it once, the next time you indulge that fantasy, your willpower is eroded a bit more, and you will inevitably go back. You cannot do it just through logic. You have to understand how to stop triggering off the withdrawal symptoms, the cravings. And you do that by, as soon as you get the feeling of discomfort, a bit of awareness in here, that you want a fag, or you'd like some cocaine, or you'd like a drink of alcohol. It's 4:30. I usually have a drink at 4:30, as the client said to me yesterday. As soon as you get that awareness comes into your body, you must immediately knock it on the head with negative imagery that you will have had programmed into you, ideally in the hypnotherapy session. And you'll immediately see, if it's a cigarette, see yourself wheezing and coughing up snot and wheezing and not able to breathe and struggling for breath, and your children crying and all the rest of it. And you just knock it on the head. The price of recovery is you must never allow a positive fantasy to go unchallenged. That's the price of recovery. Over time, those fantasies will come less and less and just wear out.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. All very valuable information, Joe, and thank you for that. In terms of the work and the research you've done, I mean, it has been, groundbreaking work research that you have published.
Indeed, indeed, we have shown that the Human Giv Therapy, which is a brief solution-focused therapy, focused upon directly solving the problems that are getting in the way of people having a life, and using the most powerful tools available, including guided imagery and using reason as well as you would in cognitive therapy.
Yes.
Using those tools, that you can help most people who are in distress in a handful of sessions. It doesn't have to be years of therapy.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
not practical anymore. There's so many people who are mentally ill. It's just not practical. And we got people waiting 6 and 9 months before their GP can send them to a therapist. It's just
Yeah.
so wrong.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we now have the evidence that antidepressants don't work. They don't work any better than placebo. And it's about 1 in 3 people get some benefit from them. That's not the answer.
No, no, yeah. In your book, I think you talk about the expectation fulfillment of dreams in that. Um, can you explain how that relates to addiction, or if possible?
Well, the reason why we dream is that in the course of every day, we have expectations. Now, expectations are not wishes like Freud would have said. An expectation is something that physiologically arouses you. You anticipate something is going to happen, or you have a desire to do something. And either this thing doesn't happen, or you suppress the desire to do it. You want to hit your boss clatter in the face for his way he's disrespected you and marginalized your work. And you'd love to hit him. But of course you don't.
Yeah. No.
Drop and end up in jail. But that
Indeed.
is still inside your nervous system wanting to get out.
Yeah.
And if we allowed suppressed impulses to build up day after day, we would go insane. So nature takes the brain offline in our sleep, in dream sleep, takes the brain offline, the body is paralyzed, and the suppressed impulses from waking are now acted out metaphorically, by pattern match. So why is getting confused with waking reality? We act them out and they're switched off. Most of our dreams we don't even remember. Now, this pertains to addictions in two ways. If you suppress a desire for a cigarette, you may well have a dream, and you may remember it that night where you smoke a cigar. But don't be bothered about it, because that is your brain getting rid of that addictive impulse, fulfilling it and then switching it off online. It's just clearing it out of the brain, so it's not hanging around for you the next day as much strongly. That's one thing. The other thing is, as you know, of course, Aidan, that we now have a scientific explanation for hypnosis, and it's getting people into the REM state. The REM state was the brain's originally used to program the fetus in this mother's womb with the templates for being human, how to suck a breast, how to swallow, how templates for walking, templates for language, which all come out in their own time when they're due. And it's the brain's programming state. And through hypnosis, we can access that state. And that's why we can reprogram the expectations. Positive with giving up the addiction, negative with continuing it. So because the expectation theory of dreaming both explains hypnosis, and it also explains us not to be rattled if we do have a dream in which we relapse. It's just the brain clearing out that impulse that you successfully suppress the previous days. So give yourself a clap in the back and say, that's great, I'm just getting my brain getting rid of it.
So we have inbuilt in us that mechanism to reconcile something that is gone awry within us.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's it all came about through hot-bloodedness. Before we got hot-blooded, we had to wait for the sun to warm us up, and we'd have to lie in a rock or hang around till we got the energy. Now, we weren't human beings back then. But once hot-bloodedness came into being, creatures were able to run around, do all kinds of things, go and hunt at night and do all kinds of things. But that required massive energy. And the brain had to work out an energy conservation method that we didn't waste energy. So it increased the cortex in all animals that learned to dream, so that the cortex could take a second look at an impulse and say, is that really a rabbit that's in the bush there, or is that just something that's blowing there? And it stopped us acting out every impulse we got, because once we had hot-bloodedness, we could give vent every impulse. But we'd starve to death, we burned all those calories. So the hot-bloodedness and the expectation of dreams came about so the brain could suppress impulses that weren't going to be life enhancing. But then it had to get them out of the brain, and then dreaming became the mechanism to get them safely out of the brain.
And it's fascinating. And I'm not telling you something you don't know, Joe. You know more than I, but the capacity that the human beings have within our heads to, heal ourselves, and indeed how that healing, if you want to call it, or that bringing things to resolution, can actually be accelerated using, as you say, guided imagery, or using indeed formal hypnosis, or indeed self-hypnosis.
Yes. Oh, undoubtedly. It is the most powerful tool in our armory. The guided use of our own imaginations to redirect our lives away from harmful, negative impulses, and to motivate us to do things that will be life enhancing for us. It's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Thank you very much for all this really, really valuable stuff we're talking about. And I know our listeners and our viewers will find it hugely beneficial, benefiting from your experience and your knowledge and your teaching. Would you comment, Joe, if you could, on the correlationship, or we want to call it, is correct to use a correct term, the comorbidity, we say, of depression and addiction?
Well, a client I had yesterday has both got an alcohol addiction and he's on antidepressants.
Yeah.
And so they're quite often comorbid, they quite often occur simultaneously. And it was clear from when I got all the background information from my client yesterday that this person, prior to their addiction, had been struggling with negative moods. I mean, since childhood, in fact, I've been struggling with negative moods. Did not have great anxiety management skills, well, practically none of them, practically zero anxiety management skills. There were problems at home. His father had been an alcoholic, etc. And he had been depressed from a young age. So when he discovered alcohol, it seemed like an answer to a problem. It got him away from all the negative rumination. It lowered the anxiety, and it seemed like a miracle drug to him. But very often, as you know, tolerance builds up to you, so you have to take more and more of it. And then he gets married in his young family. His wife doesn't want to see somebody who's out of it, sitting beside her every night, trying to watch television. So she takes a look at him and she can see he's out of it. And that's why he ended up in my office, because she said, I'm not going to put up with this for the next 30 years. Either you get yourself sorted or this is over. And one of the things that came as a revelation to him is that when I explained to him that addiction, like alcohol, the reason why your partner will very often in the end the relationship is because your relationship has ceased to be with your partner. Your relationship is now with alcohol. It's alcohol that you think about all the time when you're under stress. It's alcohol that you're looking for succor to and solace to. And so the alcohol has stolen your relationship. You're no longer emotionally intimate with your partner. Your emotional intimacy is with the addictive habit. And so the partner feels belittled and eventually won't be able to take it. And that was a revelation. She said, nobody ever explained to me that the alcohol was stealing the intimacy from my wife. It was destroying my relationship for that reason. So it's interesting. Mm-hmm. So depression and the alcoholism, go back to your question, Aidan, both occur for the same reason, as an attempt. The depression is the consequence of not getting the needs met, and excessive rumination leading to excessive dreaming, leading to brain exhaustion. And the alcohol is an attempt to try and manipulate that. So both coming from the same place in a way.
Absolutely. And if I could stretch the envelope, Joe, if I could, so many young people nowadays are, doing suicide. Would you comment on that and how we could, help, or as therapists, what we need to do?
It is so sad. It's so sad when a person commits suicide. And almost even more sad when it's a young person with a whole life's potential to them. Now, the reason people commit suicide, you can get books that would stretch from one end of my office to the other, all putting forward theories as to why people commit suicide, from an army to all kinds of things. But there was ever only one reason. There will ever be only one reason why a person kills themselves. And that reason is they have no hope of a better future. That's the reason. It's not that they want out of this life. It's that they want out of the pain. They have no hope that they can cure. If they could see that there was a possibility in the future getting rid of the emotional distress they're in, they wouldn't kill themselves. It's because they've got no hope of a better future. Their key life needs not being met for them, and they've got no hope. So the most important job when we're with somebody who's suicidal in that first session is we've got to build hope that recovery is possible, that the mood they're in now is temporary, and that it can change. That's the most important thing in that first session, because otherwise they may kill themselves before the second session. Yes. We got to build hope of recovery. And then we have to take a look at what is it that they're missing. Are they missing key life skills? Are they missing emotional management skills? Are they missing communication skills? What is it? Have they got untreated PTSD? What is it that's stopping them making their life work? We have to work on removing those barriers. But we do need clear thinking. The other tip I can give you if you're dealing with somebody who's suicidal is don't try and get them to sign a contract that they won't kill themselves, because that's just depressing them even more. Because at the moment they see their suicide as one solution to their problems, and you're taking that away from them. That's not a good place to go at all. But instead, what you do is you ask them to agree to a postponement. Will you agree to postpone killing yourselves, say, until we do 5 sessions together, 3 sessions together, and then see how you feel? Would you be able to make that degree of a commitment? I'm not asking you to be unreasonable of me to
Yeah.
say you'll never do it, but would you be willing to postpone it? And that seems much more accessible to them.
Mm. I was involved with a very well-known UK Ireland charity, and one of the questions we would have asked people is, do you really want to die, or do you just want the pain to go away?
Love it.
You know, and that I think that, and combined with what you were saying, I think it puts in somewhat into perspective
Yes.
for them.
Suicide has been beautifully described as a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yeah, yeah,
And
indeed.
that's the problem with suicide. It's permanent, but your problems are temporary. They can be solved. You see,
Mhm.
because you get yourself into this emotional state where you can only do catastrophic thinking because all your higher intelligence is inhibited by the
Yeah.
high levels of stress you're experiencing.
Mhm.
You are convinced that there's no solution possible.
Yeah,
You're convinced that your reality can't change. And that's
yeah,
why if we do relaxation and guided imagery or hypnosis with them, get
yeah.
their arousals down, talk to them about the resources that they have, and open up the possibility of change, we will very often get them out of that suicidal
Yeah.
state.
Yeah, very powerful statement there, Joe. Opening up, because as we know, clients who present with many issues, they have this foveal vision, and they're focused in on one single point, the exclusion of everything else.
Yes.
And it's I suppose it's our job, or to help people to get in touch with that, the parasympathetic, that part of the brain that enables us to see things in right perspective.
Yes, because we relax, we calm down, we release the higher intelligence in the brain to be able to see
Uh,
with much
yeah,
perspective. Yes.
yeah. Now, you may have answered this, Joe, and again, I'm in awe of, not just because you're sitting in front of me here on the screen, but I'm in awe of the work that you've done, because you've revolutionized, in my mind, many areas of working with clients. The Just to perhaps highlight again, your book, what would you say what are the common misconceptions about addiction? Again, just to focus in again, if you don't mind, that your book aimed to correct.
Well, firstly, that addiction is a biological illness that you're stuck with for the rest of your life. That is a very depressing thought. And
Yeah.
wholly now, some people benefit from the idea that they've got a disease, and it helps relieve guilt, and it helps their people around them to treat them better. So there's a certain humanity was brought about because people started saying it was a disease, but it also brought about a certain hopelessness. You're stuck with it for the rest of your life. You had to stay
Yeah.
in continual therapy and support groups for the rest of your life, and it's just not true. It's just not true. I'm just right now, I'm just thinking of a man who came to see me a number of years ago. He was given a life expectancy of 2 years. He was in his 40s. A life expectancy. He'd been thrown out of every rehab in Ireland. He was heavily using heroin and alcohol. He couldn't leave his house until afternoon because he wouldn't be able to get the shakes under control. He had to get that much alcohol into him. And I worked with him. And you would think, that, well, this guy is definitely got a biological illness. He's going to be an addict for the rest of his life. He's going to have to be in therapy for the rest of his life. But actually, that guy is still alive 20 years later. He's happily married. He chose not to drink again because he felt that was the right thing for him. But he's not joining in any support group or AA or whatever. He developed a whole career, went to university in his 40s, got qualifications, developed a career for himself, got into his previous marriage had been destroyed by his drug habit, but he got into a new relationship that has survived for 20 years.
Mm.
And the guy is happy, a well-functioning member of society. And I feel that he's been so much more empowered by the idea that you can recover from an addiction and take back control over your life, rather than feeling that you have to be supportive for the rest of your life,
Mm.
outside of your family and your friends.
Yeah. So it's self-empowering.
It is self-empowering.
Yeah.
Now, I've got nothing against AA or some things like that. If people benefit from them, I would never dream of interfering with their approach. But if people don't want to go to them, I can say it's perfectly possible to recover and take back control of your life. And you can do that if you learn the skills that you will need to be sober and to get your life going. You're willing to work with me on this.
Yeah.
Perfectly possible.
The human given skills, as you mentioned, we mentioned earlier. One quote from the book that struck me was, "You won't pursue a behavior that threatens your health and your life unless you believe it also offers something that you value highly."
Yes, yes. That is so true. I mean, addiction is so destructive. So there has to be some really positive gain. And that's why I don't really hold with therapeutic approaches that say the addiction does nothing for you. It is doing something for you. If we don't acknowledge what the person thinks they're getting out of their addiction, they may not be getting, they think the expectation, the belief, the addiction is doing this for them. If we don't tackle that head on and dismantle it, take it apart, and show that, you know, it's not really doing what you think it is. In the short term, it can relieve emotional pain and distress and loneliness. But at a price of exacerbating those conditions. And that's what we have to help them to see.
Yeah.
So we have to not only see that, but also help them create ways. You see, what addiction, the vulnerability to addiction arises because it's tapping into something that's really powerful in our human brain. And that is, we have the capacity to get natural highs. Nature never intended us to be on an even, sober, boring keel for 24/7 a day. Nature wanted us to get excited and passionate and delighted and thrilled. And nature gives us natural highs, especially when we achieve something. When we do something, achieve something, learn something, we get natural highs.
Yeah.
And those feelings make life meaningful and worthwhile. It's achievement, stretching, challenging, learning. But addiction hijacks that circle. That circle releases dopamine, which is what addiction hijacks. And the person is now getting highs, at least in the early stages of addiction, artificially from their drug or their gambling or whatever, sex addiction, whatever it is. Over time, of course, the highs get worn out and you're just trying to control the low feelings. So yet the person believes they're getting something from it. And we have to help them to see that it is an illusion, that is a temporary relief. It's like borrowing money from a loan shark. You can get a very short-term bit of relief, but they're going to be back demanding so much payment and interest off you. It's going to make your life 10 times worse.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And what advice, Joe, would you give to family members or friends who are trying to support someone who is in addiction?
Now, isn't that really, really good? Because people so often go about it the wrong way.
Yeah.
And the first thing we have to recognize is that recovery from addiction is not something the person just wakes up one morning and says, "That's it, I'll never drink again, I'm sober." It doesn't happen. Or "I'll never smoke again." It doesn't happen. Although people who have recovered love to invent a retrospective story whereby they just decided to do it all on their own and they did it 9 o'clock on the 20th of June, I became a non-smoker. In reality, we know from research that there's a long-term process that the person undergoes before they get control over an addictive habit. And that process, first of all, starts with being in love with the addiction. Person is literally in love. This is fantastic. I get rid of all my shyness, my inhibitions when I snort cocaine or I drink the alcohol, or the fags really help me to relax and they give me confidence. So at first the person is in love, pre-contemplation, or denial, as we used to say in the old days. Then the person starts over time, starts to, "Oh God, there's a bit of a cost here. I'm getting hangovers now, worse than I used to get, and it's starting to cost me more and more money. And I've been going into work a bit hungover." So the person starts to notice the negative bit. So now there's a weighing scales in their brain, and they're saying, "This is the price. This is the pain that addiction caused me, but this is the pleasure." Now, at this stage, relatives and friends are noticing this person's drinking or whatever is out of control, and they think they want to put pressure on him to stop controlling it. But in a way, that's only adding, puts them back into denial because they know that they're getting pleasure out of it and it's helping them cope with life. And it's going to make them feel resistant. And you don't want them to be resistant. You want them to be able to look objectively at what they're doing. So you could, at this stage, ask meaningful questions so that are non-threatening and ask them, "Are you happy with what's happening? How do you feel after it? Do you have any concerns about the money? Is this causing any problems for your work?" You can ask questions, but no advice. And above all, no criticism if you want to help them. You want to help the process along so they start to review their behavior. And At a certain point in time, they will say to themselves, the pain is worse than the gain. It's not worth it anymore, this drinking. I'm sick of smoking. That's the truth. I'm sick of smoking. So now they move into what's called the determination phase. They are now getting determined or psyching themselves up to really do something about it. At that stage, we can ask them, what plan do you have? How might you go about it? And then the next stage is they actually do something, they take action. They quit smoking on that Monday morning. They go to rehab. They go to see a hypnotherapist. They do something. And they take action. And as a result of that action, they've either cut down or they've cut out the addictive habit. So that means they're moved into maintenance. And that's the really tricky phase. But there's something really powerful to know here, and that is that most addicts, I'm using inverted commas for that, most addicts on a first attempt, maybe even a second or a third attempt at getting on top of an addiction, are going to relapse. Relapse is part of the journey of recovery. So when you have somebody in front of you saying, I've got no willpower, I've tried to quit smoking 5 times, I've always gone back. And you say, whoa, hang on. Tell me how long, tell me about it. How long, why did you stop? How long I set off at one for 2 weeks. Wow, that is fantastic. That is a great achievement. People who succeed ultimately have had a number of attempts, and the ones who succeed learn from the attempts. Why did I go back? I went into a high-risk situation. I had no plan. Why did I go back? I was under pressure of work and I didn't have any other coping skills, so I went back. So you learn to build into your recovery plan strategies for dealing with those high-risk situations in the future. So we do not argue. If you argue with somebody who's an addict, you're going to make them worse. You're going to make them more defensive. But we can ask questions, helping them to explore, where are they at? We can, if they've moved where they say, I'm sick of this, I really want to quit. We can explore, well, how do you think you might go about it? Do you think you might need professional help? And maybe help them create some options here to get some professional help if that's an avenue they're willing to explore. But it has to be done supportively and not aggressively and not attacking them, because you'll only make the addiction worse.
Excellent. And excellent. Just to sort of lighten it up a bit, can you tell us a story, Joe, if you don't mind, of the lady with the toothache?
Yes, I do remember this lady really well. She came to see me. I'd done the routine with her to help her give up smoking.
Yeah.
I was taken aback when she rang me the next day. And she said, Joe, she said, I am desperate for a cigarette. She said, I am so desperate for a cigarette, I am ready to murder my children. I am ready to kill my children, Joe. So what should I do?
Yeah.
Said, look, answer a couple of questions for me. And she said, yes, get on with it, yes. I said, have you ever had a bad toothache? She said, yes. Now remember what the pain of a bad toothache. Can you remember? She said, yes. Now tell me honestly, which is worse? The bad toothache or your desire for a cigarette? She said, oh, the bad toothache. I said, okay, let me ask you another question. Have you ever had a mild nagging toothache that wouldn't go away? She said, yes. I want you to remember a time when you had that. How frustrating it was and how it upset you. Now tell me honestly, which is worse, that mild nagging won't go away toothache or your desire for a bag? So I suppose that mild nagging toothache is worse. Now answer me one more question. When you get the desire for a fag, how long does it last? But that her voice perked up a little bit and she said, oh, I'm not telling you a word of a lie, it lasts standing up to 5 minutes. I said, okay, let me get this right now. You are ready to murder your children for a piece of discomfort that's milder than a mild toothache, and it's going to be gone in a few minutes. At which point she just burst out laughing. And what had happened inside her brain was she had released the big dopamine release, fantasizing about the cigarette, which created a craving or the thought that she couldn't cope with it. But once I calmed her down, took her mind away from the craving, because that's going to go in a minute or so, got it more objectively, she could see that she was being fooled. It's being taken in.
Yeah. Excellent. That's a wonderful demonstration of how we can, dissipate the anxiety or whatever that's causing the stress at the moment. In conclusion, Joe, if there was something finally you would just like to impart to our audience who are listening, what would you say finally to people listening and watching?
I would say, I think that most of your viewers are going to be hypnotherapists. Am I right in assuming that?
Yes.
I would say that hypnotherapy is potentially one of the most effective and most powerful tools in existence for helping people with distress. but it is imperative that we learn to use it with the right psychological understandings and not get captured into out-of-date understandings, which could actually exacerbate problems.
Absolutely. Yeah. Excellent. Well, that's, I mean, I can't make that any better than, or say it express it better than you've done, Joe. It was eminently expressed and very well expressed. And thank you so much for always your generosity in talking to me and giving of your valuable time. And I urge anyone out there, therapists, non-therapists, to go and buy your books, because they do speak practical truth and knowledge and stuff that it can be implemented and actioned in a very short period of time. Joe Griffin, eminent psychologist, thank you so much for your time. Take care.
Thank you, Aidan.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye now.